Hey there, welcome to Supercharged Fridays, best time of the week. Every single Friday, we get together at the same place, same time, and we talk about all things career, how to get that dream job, how to get that promotion, and lead a happier, richer, and more purposeful life. Who doesn't want that? And as you can see, I have someone pretty special with me today who is Michael Banks. And Michael is this guru in the world of emotional intelligence. And we sort of found each other in this ocean called LinkedIn. And yeah, now we're friends. And emotional intelligence is a topic that is a tricky one because we all kind of think we have it and it's other people's problem because they don't have it. And what better time than right now, Michael, when it comes to global leadership, company leadership, self-leadership, to talk about emotional intelligence. So, Michael, I want to say a big, big thank you for your time and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you very much. Great to be here, everyone. And a big shout out to all the people I know who are probably watching me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We need it sometimes just takes a few seconds to sort of give the system a kick that we're live. So if you guys are watching, I see that Risto's here as well. So give us lots of likes and hearts and share this with your friends, not because we have a ego problem and we need your validation to feel good about ourselves, but it's more to let the algorithm know that this is happening, because I think many people would benefit from this discussion. So would love your comments. So we have lovely people here already. Michael, you can see the comments, right?
Yes, I can see the
awesome. We have Yasha from South Africa, Katerina from Ukraine, Nigeria, Mukaila. Hey, Rajiv, Mehul, lovely people. Lovely seeing you guys. Very warm welcome. Before we get started, because we want to talk a lot about emotional intelligence, and we just want to give a few seconds for others to come in and jump right in. Hey, Tegan in Chicago. It's very early morning, Bangladesh. Lovely to have you guys. Tell us in one word, what are you feeling right now? Like, just check in with your feelings, because that's part of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness. So, Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are you feeling right now? Can you give me one word?
One word. Okay. Excited. Nervous.
Excited?
Well, you've got two there. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Lovely. Excited. What are you guys feeling? Give us a word, and I'm going to give you guys a few seconds. We have, lovely, interesting people. Hong Kong, Rajiv, Lalit, Andy, how are you? Hey, Lauren, lots of fans of yours, Michael, I can see. Eugenie not far away in Belgium. And it's early morning for a lot of people in the US. So appreciate you guys. You could be early morning, morning people, but, tuning in, it means a lot. So thank you. Bon après-midi. I'm feeling, Michael, I'm going to tell you very honestly what I'm feeling. I'm feeling tired. It's been a long week. So no pressure, but I've got a lot of expectations, a lot of excitement from this show to get my energy back up. So I'm not just physical, I'm emotionally feeling a little bit drained. This whole past week, lots of stuff has been happening. Energized. Okay, good. Maybe Tegan, your energy is going to rub off on me as well. Hungry. Andy, go get some breakfast, buddy. What else can I say if you're hungry? Hey, Melissa. Lovely. Great. Sonia is in Melbourne. It's 10 p.m. for her. So we've got people from pretty much every nook and corner here, Michael. So let's get started. Michael, for those of you who don't know you, give us a brief introduction of who you are and give us some juicy details.
Okay. But before I do that, I actually misanswered your question. I can't see any of the comments at all. How do I make sure
Okay. On the right-hand side, there should be something that is a comments tab on your right. Do you see it?
I got it. Yes. Oh my gosh.
You can see all of them. So they're like...
You're all there. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, it's lots of...
Fantastic.
Okay, fabulous. Lovely, anyway, charged up. So yes, Michael.
I'll answer your question.
Yes.
Before I start chatting to all the people here. Okay, so I think where it all started for me is I went to an English boarding school. And I really started the whole process of self-realization when I was standing in the junior common room at the age of 13, in the midst of loads of teasing and bullying, which was very typical back then in an English all-boy public school. and decided it doesn't have to be like this. And I was furious, upset, and went on a journey, and I'm still on it. So I started out after university in Peckham Adventure Playground. So for 3 years, it was the worst, for 3 years I was there, and it was the worst part of London at the time. And I spent my time working with Jamaican youth, most of them involved in crime, which was very different from a very sort of closeted middle-class upbringing and university background. I then became a part of an experimental group of companies in London in the 80s. The whole purpose of that was really to create the ideal work environment, and pretty controversial to begin with. And then we had loads of copycats after a while, very successful. However, I then moved to America in '89, became an expert in team building. My biggest client to begin with was American Express. So I worked with their executive teams around the world, a lot of work in New York City. And then I was a partner and a sort of leading partner in what many people considered was the #1 executive coaching firm in America at the time, KRW International. So we were kind of pioneers in the whole field of executive coaching. And then I became independent, and I've been independent for about 15 years. I came back from the States after 28 years, 3 years ago, and I'm affiliated and work primarily with PeopleSmart, which is a super quality company involved in people and leadership development. And I spend most of my time when I'm not doing executive development, executive coaching, leadership development. I write, and I've got a fantastic, well, I think it's fantastic podcast series called Leadership Luminaries, and I love doing that. So that's me. Hope that wasn't too long, Sonal.
That was wonderful. I didn't know a lot of this stuff, so thank you for sharing, and particularly all that stuff that you talked about youth and Jamaica and the whole experience being young, because here you are 40, 50 years later. That stuff doesn't leave you. You learn a lot from it, but it's also about how you treat it. So fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think, Michael, you're a little bit modest, and anybody who's watching who knows a thing or two about emotional intelligence, there's a book called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, and the new version of the book, Michael's been quoted in it. So I wanted to say that because
I must correct you, Sonal. I mean, it's not the new. It was the second book he wrote called The Business Case for Emotional Intelligence. Okay. So I just want to be correct.
Yeah, thank you. You're absolutely right. But at the same time, you've met this guy. This gentleman, and obviously, you've been doing this for so many years. So my point is, this dude knows a thing or two about emotional intelligence. We are talking to the right person. So I'm so glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you.
So perfect. Let's get cracking. And I know that I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions as well. So guys, hold on to your questions. Lots of new faces. Jaffrey Books, welcome guys. Betty, how are you, dear friend? Michael, let's dive right in.
Okay.
Now talk to us about, so you talked to us a little bit already in the introduction about the role that emotional intelligence has played during your career. So I'm not sure I need to ask you this, but I don't know if you want to add something here that you haven't said already.
Well, I think it's interesting, the experience in Peckham, which is in South London, with the youth there, was a sort of early experience of me having to deploy my emotional intelligence skills. I hadn't had any training or certification at that point. And it was before, there was such a thing as emotional intelligence. In fact, it was Goleman in '95 who actually, coined that phrase. But because it was dangerous, because I didn't want my car to be broken into, which was always parked outside the center, and because a lot of them carried knives, they didn't have guns in those days, I don't think anyway. I had to build rapport very quickly with some really tough characters, and so it was an exercise in survival, but it was a survival based on building relationship. And I think when we talk about emotional intelligence, what we're fundamentally talking about is people skills, the ability to create and build and maintain good relations with other people.
Yeah.
That's how I define it.
Yeah. And how did you do that to, obviously your why was very clear. I don't want to see my car broken. It's a clear purpose. There's nothing wrong with it. How did you do that? I'm just a little curious because if any of us here
Yeah.
have difficult characters around us, maybe we can learn a thing or two from your experience.
Absolutely. I think there's the best way of answering that, Sonal, is to talk about a model, a very simple model, incredibly simple, so simple that it almost, even now when I talk about it, seems like it's overly simplistic.
Okay,
But
I'm taking notes.
it's a model I call it the communication model. And I first learned of this model back in the 80s. And it's a model that has three parts: when you talk, when you listen, when you acknowledge the person who's talking to you. I call it the inform, invite, listen cycle. And so therefore, each of those pieces become really important. And the thing about this model within that is that I differentiate between reaction and response. Because when we're under stress, especially, and when we're under pressure, or when we think badly of someone, we might think they're an idiot, they might think they're stupid, whatever. It's very easy to allow those thoughts and feelings to color the way we communicate to that person. So, for example, take it back to the adventure playground. Instead of thinking or saying to one of these youths, "Look, you're stupid. Don't you understand you can't pull a knife on a young kid?" That doesn't work. So it's a question of actually really not reacting and responding. And when you respond, you actually communicate in a manner that gets you the result you want, despite what you're thinking and feeling. So you have to be aware of the thoughts and feelings in the first place. You put them to one side, and then you communicate in a manner that's productive, and there's a win-win. That's the essence of the model. And that's the essence of teaching emotional intelligence. It is the difference between reacting and responding. And if you're reacting, you're out of control. You're a victim of your feelings and thoughts and beliefs.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're responding, what you're doing is you're choosing. You're allowing yourself to choose the outcome you want. You're not a puppet in the hands of your own feelings and thoughts. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. You know what? It sounds incredibly simple,
Yeah.
but it sounds like it's incredibly hard.
It is incredibly.
Because it's so tempting, Michael, to say, "Are you like, what the heck is wrong with you? Why would you do this?" And you're saying that's a reaction, but instead choose to respond. So we're almost like rewiring our brain, and that's pretty much a lot of what emotional intelligence is about. But if we do a Google search, there's a plethora of definitions out there. If you could explain it to a 10-year-old in a very simple definition, like, what is this darn thing?
Yes.
Intelligence. Yeah.
I think it's the ability to perceive, understand, and manage our own emotions and the emotions of others.
Lovely.
Okay.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. And interestingly enough, the first thing in any emotional intelligence model, whether it's Daniel Goleman, Genos International, is self-awareness. In all my years of coaching executives, the first thing, the foundation has to be to help the person develop their own self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because without that, you can't make choices, because you don't know how you're impacting other people. And in fact, interestingly enough, because of that experience in boarding school, I was traumatized at that time. And it wasn't until the age of 25 I actually discovered what my feelings were.
Right.
I mean, it might sound weird of course I had feelings, but to be conscious of them.
Yeah.
And when I did, the release of energy was incredible.
Yeah, because it had been pent up for so long. And I know what you're saying. I mean, you had feelings, but you may not have been in touch with them. You may not have been allowed to be in touch with them, whether by others or giving yourself permission. But
yes,
it must have been such a experience,
It was amazing. And what's interesting about that, and you said that you mentioned it kind of, or alluded to it, is that it was all blocked up for years. And every photograph from the age of sort of 14 through to 25, you could see the anger etched in my face.
Yeah.
And then the day that it sort of all released, my face changed. And
Yeah.
you can do that with people. If this is part of emotional intelligence, if you're not aware of how you're actually holding on to feelings, they will actually stay in your physical body.
Yeah.
And also affect the way you communicate. And when you can perceive them, understand them, be conscious of them, that's the first step in releasing them. It also allows you then to understand other people's emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a little bit of an aha moment. I don't know if you guys in the who are watching, if you agree with it as well, but the fact that emotional intelligence or self-awareness or the lack of it can actually show up on your face. And if you go back, and maybe that's an interesting exercise, Michael, for all of us. If we
Yep.
go back and see our childhood pictures, and I'm thinking, oh, good Lord, I hope my kids are happy kids because it's going to be like visible on their face. It's interesting that it manifests itself in some way or the other. So I love that. And let's have, because you talked about self-awareness, so let's segue into that, because I know that even people in the book, and those who haven't read the book, don't worry, you're still in the right place, because there's 4 types that it talks about in the book. But Michael, if you could shed some light on it, like really simple terms, what are the types of emotional intelligence? Maybe some people here are taking notes if they're really like paying attention.
Sure. Well, actually, Daniel Goleman's model has 4 types, or 4 competencies, if you like. The one that I like to use and do use a lot, and I think is actually better, is Genos International's model.
Mm-hmm.
It has six competencies, right? Not 6 competencies, and it has self-awareness. The second competency is awareness of others. The third is authenticity. So the opposite of that is being untrustworthy. The positive side of that is being genuine. The fourth one is emotional reasoning, which is an interesting one, where you actually use and are aware of emotions when it comes to making decisions and how decisions impact on other people, which is very important. And the fifth one is self-management, which is all about resilience. And the opposite of being resilient is temperamental, where especially under stress again, and especially in these current times, the importance of resilience is very important.
Yep.
And then finally, inspiration, the ability to inspire people, positively inspire people. There's a great exercise that we do, which you might want to do, everybody, even just mentally at the moment. But I've often done this with groups, and this is one of the Genos exercises that illustrates emotional intelligence perfectly. Think of a manager or a boss who you found pretty awful to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
we all know somebody like that. Am I right or am I right? Guys, put a little yes in the comments. I tell you I'm not alone. And you know what? I think, Michael, we learn a lot from those managers.
Yes.
Sometimes more than the really godly and sweet and managers, right?
Absolutely. And a thing about authenticity, which is one of my pet subjects, and I actually write about and speak about skillful authenticity, which is so crucial nowadays. But anyway, the bad manager, how do they make you feel? How did they make you feel?
Yeah.
And then a good manager, the boss you really liked, how did they make you feel as well? And you compare the two, and there's a world of difference. The good one, you feel motivated, you feel excited, you're happy, you're comfortable, you're at ease. The bad manager, you might feel fearful. You might get frozen mentally because of that fear. You might be demotivated. I mean, there's all kinds of negativity around someone who is not emotionally intelligent as a boss. So that's just one example.
That's so interesting. It's not even about the boss. It's about how they make us feel.
Yes, well, exactly. And actually, everything is about how you feel. if you're in sales, you know that the important thing is, in fact, nowadays, especially when products, it's hard to differentiate between products when there's 1,000 computers on the market.
Yeah.
But it's that salesperson who makes you feel amazing that you're more likely to want to buy from than the salesperson who has the same product essentially, but sounds like they don't really care very much, or they're not tuned into you. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. And there's research to prove everything that you're saying, that people who are in tune with themselves or have a higher, I'm guessing EI and EQ are the same thing.
Yes, I mean, people use both.
People use both. It's like saying CV and resume, and the snobs,
Yeah.
the snobs in the chat will be like, oh, sacrilege. But for common parlance, we're talking about the same thing. So EI,
Yeah.
EQ. So a person with a higher EQ is performing better at sales because they're reading. What you said was awareness of others, right? Is very high.
Yes.
And you also talked about resilience,
Yeah.
which is self-management. Like, okay, you faced a rejection, get up, dust off, move again, right?
Yeah.
And so which makes a lot of sense. And
Can I? Sorry to interrupt. I've got lots to say, obviously.
Yes, we could go on all day, but I
know. But the point you just raised, which is very interesting about resilience, and if something goes wrong, you dust yourself off, you get up and start again. There's a very interesting exercise that you can do, which demonstrates the how important it is to move through how you feel. Okay, so. And I've done this with people. I've had them stand up in a group and say, and I ask them the question, how do you feel right now? And they'll say, I feel self-conscious. I feel, nervous. Okay, so good. How do you feel now? Well, I feel a bit, prickly. I feel a bit, it's a weird sensation. I'm a bit breathless. Okay, good. How do you feel now? And, I feel quite warm now. How do you feel now? I feel starting to feel quite relaxed. Good. How do you feel now? I'm actually quite excited. So what that demonstrates is that if you're conscious of how you feel, don't try to suppress it. Just be conscious of those feelings, and then allow them to be there. And you'll be amazed that you can actually move through those feelings. And of course, you don't want to move through them if they're very happy.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So the person who's answering that, Michael, then also has to be open and be like, what the heck? You just asked me that. Why are you asking me again? So obviously the EQ is very low, because for them to really pinpoint what they're feeling at that moment, I mean, we're human beings, we're emotional beings, but we're not all in touch with those emotions.
No, absolutely. And by the way, I'm talking about an environment or a context when I would do those sort of exercises with people who are already in touch. This was just to demonstrate that you can move very quickly through feelings and change the state you're in. But you make a good point, Sonal. The fact is that this is the thing. If you ask someone how they feel, they often say, well, I think I'm okay. Well, actually, quite literally, that's not a feeling.
No.
It's a thought. There is a difference between thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love it. And yes, Lauren, we're all about being practical here. So it's not, fluffy examples, but also help everyone, right? So Melissa's asking in Boston. So if, it's a bad boss situation, how do you get out of your head and stay motivated? Especially if you feel you're always putting out, and like this negative energy. And Melissa, this question itself can be a whole episode, right? So Michael, if you could, what do you say to that? The short version.
How do you get out of feeling demotivated?
With a bad boss situation.
With a bad boss. Oh my gosh.
I hate bad boss.
We're going to go slightly off the topic in a way, but I mean, there are so many answers to that. You could, if you have the luxury of doing so, you could always leave the company, or you could go to HR. But ideally, what you want to be able to do is to be skillful enough to actually have an honest conversation with the boss, which is scary.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of courage and it takes some skill.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to, and this is where, going back to what I was talking about earlier about how you use the communication model that I mentioned,
Yeah.
which is, again, a simple way of giving you the mechanical tools.
Yeah.
So, and then this brings into play how you communicate to the boss. So, for example, if you're feeling demotivated, you might be feeling angry, you might be feeling frustrated with that individual manager or boss.
Yeah.
So you're not happy with them. But the thing is that what you've got to be careful of is allowing that feeling, for want of a better expression, that negative feeling to come through when you're talking to your boss about this very tricky matter.
Yeah.
I mean, this is this is when, if I'm coaching someone, I actually say, we go into more detail, but you would do some role playing and stuff. But it's about being, again, inform, invite, listen, 3 parts to that model. Sharing with the boss how you're feeling, which takes a bit of courage. But in doing that, it's to a degree disarming. It disarms the other person.
Right.
Because you're being very open. You're not accusing. You're not pointing the finger. Your tone of voice is not one that indicates that you are pissed off and you're thinking your boss is wrong. But when you're talking to the boss, you actually say, look, I'd like to have first of all, an honest conversation, go in the right place at the right time where you can have a full conversation, and then actually share with the boss how you're feeling, the impact that you're having, what you'd ideally like, how you'd ideally like to be treated, what you need. And then while you're doing all of that, make sure that you ask questions like, do you understand what I'm saying? Is this, and you even have to say, and we're getting off topic a bit here. Yeah. You have to say, look, I'm coming to you not because I want to, make you feel bad or anything, but because I want to perform better.
Yeah.
And I know I'm demotivated, and I'm sure you'd like me to perform better, and so on. So, so tell me, how do you think that how do you feel about what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you get the boss to talk, and then you listen to what they're saying, and even if it's not very nice, doesn't matter. You listen to what they're saying, and even if it doesn't get resolved at that time, doesn't matter. It starts the process of shifting the nature of the relationship you have with the boss.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That really helps. I hope it helps you, Melissa. Focus on the 3 step communication model that Michael shared: talk, listen, and acknowledge. And so that's something pretty wonderful here. Our emotions drive the quality of our decisions and relationships, and also the quality of our questions. So, go with an open mind. There's no right or wrong answer here. Whatever works for you. So I hope this helps. And there's some advice here from Risto as well, who's got a library of books on bosses, and do check that out. And Michael, when it comes to emotional intelligence, what do you think? Is one of those things that we're just born with, like a talent or a skill? If not, how can we work on it?
That's a great question. I think some people are naturally gifted. And a lot of it depends on, your environment, your parents, your family, and how you were raised and so on. And some people are not so gifted. And you can definitely develop emotional intelligence skills. Absolutely. And you can do that in a number of ways. Obviously, one way is starting with self-awareness. How do you become more self-aware? Well, you can become more self-aware by getting feedback. So, for example, the Genos International company that I mentioned before, I think they're the best in the world for assessment instruments for emotional intelligence.
Is it GENOS?
GENOS, yes.
International.
Yes, you can go to their website and you can learn all about.
I'm going to put that down so people can.
Yeah, okay. Because in terms of assessments, it's really great. You can either assess yourself, and you get detailed report out of that, or you can be assessed by your colleagues, If you're a leader, you can be assessed by, the sort of 360 type of thing. But people actually get involved with assessing you. So, I mean, there's a lot of assessment tools out there. I mean, you can go online. There's lots of nowadays a lot of emotional intelligence surveys and quizzes. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But again, and then there's feedback from trusted colleagues. It's nice to and not just at business. I mean, in your personal life. I mean, your partner, your wife, your husband, your partner, whoever. Hopefully, you've they're willing to tell you when you're being a bully, or when you're being insensitive, or not being empathetic, whatever. Then there's another category, which is very interesting. If you set yourself on a journey early in life of self-realization, if you like, call it a spiritual journey, but I'll call it self-realization, to optimize your potential in life and your gifts. If you decide to embark on that journey, you will get challenges that, if you use those challenges properly, will allow you to develop your emotional intelligence. And by that, I mean this. If, for example, you have a crisis of health, marriage, job, whatever, it will, if you allow it to, that experience will allow you to open up to yourself in a way that perhaps you hadn't before. And I just want to say in parentheses here, what's very important, I think, about emotional intelligence, it's heart-based. IQ is mental, it's intellectual, it's rational, it's logical. EQ is if you really care about yourself and others. You're coming from that place, that heart connection. But so anyway, going back to the whole idea of these experiences, I'll give you an example. When I was living in America, for a number of years, I was renting an apartment in a place called Mill Valley. Actually, that's all I'm going to say, because I'm going to talk about this person. Anyway, the landlord was a corporate lawyer, and he was a typical corporate lawyer, hard driving, demanding, not particularly emotionally intelligent. And then towards the end of our stay there, what happened to him is he was asked to leave the house by his wife. And it took him on a journey of several months. And we were about to leave and move back to England. But his journey was from the person I just described to someone who was what I call tenderized by the experience of what he'd gone through. And he transformed to such a degree that when he and I said goodbye outside the house when we left for England, he gave me a big hug, and he was really emotional. And I noticed prior to that I would say to this person, I'll call him Ben, I said, Ben, you seem so much more alive now. You're happier. You're so much more approachable. And this man had, because of what had happened to him, which was devastating, his wife had asked him to leave home. So it had changed him in that. And I could give you many, many examples. So we can use these experiences to really get in touch with our own feelings, and in the process become more empathetic and compassionate to other people.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom. So hopefully it doesn't take that for everyone. But Michael, I want to back up a little bit, because the thing that you said, ask your colleagues, ask your spouse, your family members, help us a little bit. What exactly should we be asking?
Well, you have to be brave. You have to ask questions like, if it's a work environment, you say to your colleagues, if you're having a team meeting, you say, hey, listen, could you do me a favor? I've got a feeling that sometimes the way I lead this meeting is not ideal, but I'm not quite sure. I look around the room and that people don't seem to be very involved. Can you tell me in the next meeting, what impact am I having? I'd like feedback. Do you mind doing that? Sure, I'd be happy to.
You make it sound so you make it sound so easy. But I love that, because it's all about the quality of your question, and the more unassuming your question. And we did a session 2 weeks ago, so if you guys were here, I'm a big fan of asking great questions. But the more open-ended they are, the more unassuming they are, the better the quality of the answer that we will receive, and that will enrich us as well. So thank you. That really helped for sure.
Can I talk about the personal relationships as well? Because this, EQ, Ben Palmer, Dr. Ben Palmer, who founded Genos, who actually, by the way, if anyone's interested, my Leadership Luminaries podcast series, the last episode was Dr. Ben Palmer talking about emotional intelligence. So if you're interested in this topic, I recommend you.
Luminaries. I'm going to put that down in the comments, but I'm going to tag Michael on this live stream when we're done. So do check out Michael's LinkedIn page, connect with him. A very nice gentleman, very open and very humble. And I'm guessing Ben Palmer, Michael, is not the same Ben who gave you that tight hug when you left.
No.
I'm kidding.
No, Ben's Australian. Ben is he lives in.
Okay. So tell us about the personal relationship. Like, what do we ask?
Yeah, sure. So, I was going to say that Dr. Ben Palmer, the title of his episode, based on what he wanted me to call it, was emotional intelligence, something like business changing and life changing. And I think that says it all, because if you have these EQ skills, you can make the quality of your personal relationships and social life so much better. So anyway, what do you do asking for feedback from your partner or spouse or whatever? You ask for it. It's as simple as that. I mean, you ask for feedback. I know but it's not as easy as that, as you said, Sonal, because asking for it, you lay yourself open to the truth. But that's what you want, isn't it? You want to know what the truth is of how you impact other people. So it takes courage, but damn, well, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And listen, this stuff is it's a work in progress. I'm still challenged by it. I'm still challenged when I'm under stress. I'm not the perfect. I actually had a wife once. I had a wife once, and if I would sort of get angry and not communicate as effectively as I might do, she would say, "Michael, you teach this stuff. You're meant to be an expert in this. How come you're talking to me like that?" And it's like, it's very hard. Perfection is very difficult in this.
Absolutely. Like Sonia says, you have to ask and just stay brave. And obviously, unless you are like Jack Nicholson, where like, you can't handle the truth. Good men, you can handle the truth. You made a decision to, family, we're not talking parents here, but with a spouse, usually you made a decision. It was a insightful decision, which, by the way, has 90% impact on your career. I don't want to digress, but the fear of that is bigger than the actual thing itself. So we play it up so big. We play it up this huge thing. And I also know that deep down, it's your ego, which is placing way more importance on it than it's due. So Michael, now we talked a lot about inner, right? Yes, we had that odd question about the bad boss, but most of this is inner emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness, and even authenticity, emotional reasoning, parts of it which we've managed, self-management, resilience. Now, what do we do with, let's say I've written your over here, but somebody's, you could, maybe it's you who has the low emotional intelligence, but you don't know that, because you don't have self-awareness, or it's very low, right? So it's a kind of the chicken and the egg, and it's a similar question with someone else, like something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a separate question. That's part two. I'll come to that. But if we ourselves, if we're watching this, if you guys are watching this, you have some self-awareness, right? Because you're curious about this topic, but you don't necessarily think there's anything wrong per se. How is this approached?
Well, it depends what the context is. I mean, if it's, I can give you an example of in business. This is what I used to do, and it's very radical and extreme, and it's hard to do these days for various reasons. But what I used to do is I used to interview people around the individual. Okay, team members, direct reports, whatever, if you're in business. And I would ask them the same set of questions, and I would take down verbatim what they said, the responses. I would then put it all together. I might interview 10, 15, 20 people. Put it all together without editing or summarizing. And I would go away with this individual for a day, or maybe half a day, and I would read out loud from the top these unedited, uncensored, unsummarized verbatim quotes. What you get then is the most powerful form of feedback that is often life-changing and career-changing, because you get the clear picture, crystal clear, of how you are viewed and perceived by other people. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have that kind of feedback, then really you've got a fantastic foundation then to work with a coach or a mentor to then work on those areas that you were blindsided by. For example, I remember working with an executive, a female executive in at the time, the largest bank in the world. And she was head of a global division. And the feedback was devastating in the best sense, because it's not, you don't want to hurt people. That's not the point, but they will be upset. They'll be devastated if they are told that they're a bully or insensitive or cold, as this woman was told by this feedback. I was holding her hand. It was so positive in the end for her, because she transformed the way but she had never had that feedback. She'd reached the age of early 40s and major success, but none of the managers up to that point that she'd had ever given her feedback, which is a crime.
Which is the crime. It's a crime. Yeah.
So they didn't have the guts to do it either.
Yeah.
So, because a lot of people, you're giving feedback, it's very hard because people are scared of giving feedback, and it's a real skill to do it well.
Yeah, because there's a fear of not being liked, because deep down we're people pleasers. And I think books, you raise a very interesting point. It's also about choosing who you ask for feedback to ensure there's no hidden agendas. Obviously, the sample, it's not even the sample size, but the quality of your sample matters a lot.
Yeah.
And Sonia, that is a point, that the problem lies with the other, always. And that's our ego, right? So I see a question here. Chloe, I don't know the question, if you don't mind repeating it, because I may have missed out, because there's a bunch of comments here. But Michael, this is a fascinating discussion. And I have a question which is a follow-up to that. What do you think of these 360-degree surveys? When somebody receives the survey, particularly, let's say I'm a big manager in a company and I've got people reporting to me and they have people reporting to them. So it's a real 360, right? And my colleagues, my people above me, everything. And then I get these results and then I'm surprised. So there's a failure somewhere, right? So talk to us first about the efficacy of these surveys, just according to you, your
well, I've always felt very strongly that the traditional 360 surveys are not particularly effective. And I'll give you an example.
They're expensive. They're so expensive, but they're not effective.
They're often statistical. If you have a chance if you're giving feedback, a chance to be heard at all, it's just a little anecdotal quote, which is a small sample, easy to be dismissed. And so I'll give you this example because I think it's a really good one. There was a guy in technology in a very famous Wall Street bank who I was asked to work with by the CEO and the chief technology officer. And they said to me, we have given Fred, for one of a better word, we've given him feedback for the last 20 years. And it makes no difference. Can you try to do something about this? We don't believe you can, but give it a shot. And what his problem is that if he didn't like the way that meetings were going, he would start to get angry. He'd go red, and very quickly he'd explode verbally, even if the chairman was there or the biggest client around the table. And so the situation there called for him becoming aware for the first time of what were the mechanics of how he reacted, which is what he was doing. He was reacting. And so again, going back to reaction response, and giving him the feedback, he learned over, it took him a year, at least a year, but he said to me at the end of it, you know, my home life is so much better now. And this was a guy who, when I first used to go into his office, he would be sitting there with his back to me and he's looking at the computer screen, and he'd turn around and say, "Hi, what are we doing today?" It's like, no warmth, no greeting, no nothing really. And by the end of it, he'd turn around and say, "Hi, how was your weekend? Did you have a good time?" You know, I mean, because he'd realized that about himself. Have I answered your question? I'm not sure I have.
No, you have.
Going back to the 360s.
Yeah. I've always had a bit of a, I mean, it's an anecdotal thing, but I've always had a bit of a cynicism to it, because
Yeah.
if you are surprised with the response, there is a failure somewhere.
Yeah.
And take responsibility. It's not too late. We're not perfect. Michael, you're an expert when it comes to emotional intelligence. Does it mean you're emotionally intelligent all the time? No, because it's a job. But at the same time, like, you know, I'm a career coach, but managing my own career, HR people, how do you manage your own thing? You know, coaches need coaches. So it's one of those things where we have to keep checking in, and validation from the outside, for me personally, is not the way to go.
Yeah. Well, I think going back to your point, Sonal, I think the thing about there is a failure, and I think that's why continuous feedback is important.
Yes.
If you're managing someone, you give them feedback, and it's part of their development, and that's what people want. Yeah. You know, often there's a statistic that says the number one reason that people leave their company is because their manager is not showing enough interest in their development. And how do you develop? You get feedback.
Yeah.
You know? So it's important. So anyone on this call, if you're a manager, please, if you're, you know, do your best to give really good, frequent feedback. That's encouraging, that's positive, constructive, even when you're criticizing those people.
Yeah. And when somebody says, "Can I be brutally honest?" I feel like there's more emphasis on brutal than honest.
Yeah, I know.
Where is the intention there?
Well, brutally honest is not emotionally intelligent. It's just not. I mean, if you're brutally honest, the chances are you're going to cause that person to go into their shell.
Yeah.
And get very upset and probably get very passive aggressive.
Defensive. Yeah. No, the first thing is when somebody is attacking, it's our primitive brain. We wanna defend ourselves, and
that's the reaction. Exactly. And then, or if you get a brutal feedback, you might end up with it's the fight or flight thing. Yeah. You know? Then it's like, how dare you say that about me? You're wrong. How do you know that I do these things? And which is where a lot of
Yeah, you know what? Fight, flight. In my case, what happened, Michael, when I got this type of feedback, fight, flight, freeze. Mine was freeze. I was like, the pure numbness, and then traumatic after that. But I love that you said brutal is not emotionally intelligent, and particularly when, as managers, anybody watching, and even if you don't have people reporting to you, but you're still leaders in your own way. What was I going to say? Brutally honest. Yeah, there is a very dirty practice that people don't know they do it, but it's not even your feedback. It's somebody who told you this and you're repeating other people's feedback. Worst thing, because it's not coming from you. That happens so frequently, Michael. It's one of those things, and then the relationship is broken, you know, because it's just, can I be brutally honest? And then there's like insincere feedback coming from here and there. It's better to zip it and keep your mouth shut for that.
Exactly. I mean, the fact is, I've looked again. I'm going back to what I used to do on the scale I used to do it. The fact is that if you think about motivation for change, you're only really motivated to change if you feel upset that you're not doing well enough. and it's clear from feedback or your awareness that you're not doing well enough, so you want to change. But being told about what someone else said about you, as you just described, Sonal, is not a very effective. It doesn't touch you in the gut or in the heart. You hear it, and if you just hear it, you can easily dismiss it.
Yeah.
That's the thing about most feedback, and going back to your 360s. A lot of it is, yeah, that's right, yeah. Even if you agree with it,
Yeah.
even if you agree with the 360 results,
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Agreeing is one thing, but actually feeling it, the impact of it, and then that will cause you to want to do something about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's a lot like statistics. Risto says, life seems like it's a narrative with anecdotes and stories that do not sort of necessarily adhere to numbers. Easier to get to the point if you just and nothing like clear one-on-one feedback with the right intention.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna, because there's somebody here who's been very patient, who's had a question.
Yeah.
Michael, it looks like we might go slightly over the hour. Are you okay with that?
I'm fine, yeah. I planned for it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So Satish is asking, when you're working under pressure, managers are often unable to grasp self-awareness, while as leaders of teams, they need to almost simultaneously learn and practice social awareness and relationship management. How can we best handhold them to learn and practice both? Oof, loaded one.
It's a big one. Under pressure, let me go through this. They're under pressure. They're often unable to grasp self-awareness. Very true. Very true. Because when you're under pressure, you're reacting and you default to your worst behavior. And it's very hard to actually think clearly and to be calm and so on. And in fact, bottom line is, if managers are under pressure, they're quite often at some level, to some degree, scared. Okay, there's a lot of fear going on in the corporate world. And when someone's scared, they'll tend to be insensitive because all they're concerned about is getting the result because their boss is putting pressure on them. So I want you to do this and I want you to do it by Monday. And without consideration of the other person, whether they can do it by Monday, but all you're concerned about is self. When you're scared, you tend to be concerned about yourself, right?
And protecting us is that primitive brain, right? There's an attack coming. How can I best defend myself from attack?
Exactly. And so Satish's, what you're saying there, Satish, is very true. So as leaders of teams, you simultaneously learn and practice social. Yeah, well, how can you best handle? Well, the answer to that is you have to give them feedback. You have to advise them to practice emotional intelligence skills, competencies. You have to get them a coach, or you might be able to coach them yourselves. If your own level of EQ is high enough and you're skilled enough at doing it, you have to have authentic conversations with those individuals. So, this is where, again, the conversation is where it happens.
Yeah.
And having the willingness to have the conversations with those managers who are panicking, freezing, scared, bullying because of that, all those different outcomes that are caused by us being in a state of stress and fear. Have the conversation with them and advise them how to behave. There's so many ways, but this is a much longer conversation. But it's the authentic conversation that you're willing to have, that because you've got a relationship that in the first place is one of trust that you've built with that individual. It is relationship management from the get-go, from when they join the team or when you start leading the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That really helps. And I think also I like what Sonia is saying, good to give examples and check with them how they also hey, what do you think about this? I just said something. And another thing, Satish, the panic thing, it doesn't last, right? It comes in phases. So I think another thing to add to what you said, Michael, is timing. Sometimes the timing is off. And no matter what you say, even if that person agrees with you, it's going to be it's almost like a war. So it's better to stay away at that point of time.
I think, can I just come back at you on that one, Sonal? I think that's very, very important. If you're going to have a conversation that's a real one, that's important, that's a caring one, but it's also a truthful one. If you're going to do that, I mentioned it slightly earlier, you've got to choose the right time, like you're saying, Sonal. The right time, the right place, and enough time. Okay.
The right time, the right place, and enough time.
And enough time, yeah, because with those sorts of conversations, they could make a huge difference to
Yes.
that individual in a positive way. So don't shortchange it. Don't say, well, I've got 10 minutes between meetings, so let's have a quick chat. Forget
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
I used to advise my executives that I coached to allocate an hour, even if it only takes half an hour, but you've got to have enough time to take it through to resolution.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Quality of the conversation, don't shortchange that, and I completely agree with you on that. Abhinashi, we answered this already. EI or EQ, we it's both the same thing. And I'm going to ask Michael a question, so stick around, related to interviews, if I can get there, because there's lovely participation here from all you wonderful folks. Dale is a new LinkedIn connection. Brutal doesn't even reflect an adequate level of social awareness in regard to. Completely agree with you on that. Dale, couldn't be more true. How do you help leaders to build EI when
That's a great one, Rajiv.
Yeah, Rajiv, we could be here all day. Like you're right now, we could be here all night.
I've had to deal with them.
Acceptance is not in the dictionary. And you know what, Michael, what you said about coach, some people view it as a punishment, right? It's like, why are you giving me a coach? Like, I've done something wrong. I'm on a performance improvement plan. No, everyone needs a coach, but it's not viewed in that way. It's like a stigma.
It's actually the best way, Sonal, to look at it is that a coach, the best athletes, the best musicians, the best, I shouldn't say that. We don't want to get there. The best leaders and the most successful leaders have coaches. The most successful leaders have coaches. The people that tend to resist coaching are sort of sometimes the young high flyers who think they've got it all handled, and I don't need a coach. But I want to respond to Rajiv's question. Is it Rajiv who asked that question?
Rajiv, yes.
Yeah, they're beyond check. Yeah, Rajiv. The first thing to do is to develop a rapport, which again requires emotional intelligence, relationship skills. Develop a rapport and a trust with that individual. So you've got to have the trust building and rapport skills initially, so that individual, the leader that you're advising on emotional intelligence, is willing to listen to you. And then if you have evidence on top of the kind that I just told you, then they simply cannot refute the evidence, if you like. And by the way, if they've tried to do that with me in the past, what I would say is, look, I don't care what you think. It's not, because it's not about how you think you come across or why you think you don't need to change because you're already successful. It's about how others view you.
And perception
and you can't dispute that. That's reality. And you can and by the way, I've never met a senior leader that has ever sort of continued to put up resistance when you come with that. Ever. Even the biggest egos, even the most successful, wealthy businessmen can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you've got evidence.
Yeah. Then we have a comment here from Deepesh. DISC assessment on the onset of checking behavior under pressure, etc. Yeah, we have a few assessments, and DISC is a good one. So thank you for sharing that. Chloe is asking, it's another, we could be here all day. How do you differentiate feeling versus thought?
It's a good question. And so Chloe, how you do that is, first of all, you become aware of the thoughts going through your head. Okay, and you can do this through meditation, or you can do it simply by the practice of being conscious of what's going through your head.
sitting
Like
still.
right now, I'm conscious of actually looking at this little green dot on the screen. So hopefully I'm talking to you and not down somewhere, because I haven't got a camera yet on this thing. And the light is behind me, and or in front of me behind the laptop. So it's kind of like being in a studio where all the lights are glaring. I should be wearing shades. But anyway, these are thoughts going through my head. Feelings is where you feel, Chloe, in the body. Okay? You don't think a feeling. The feeling is, how are you feeling? Your physical sensations, your bodily sensations. Are you sweaty hands? Is your pulse rating? Is your heart thumping? Have you got a knot in your stomach? Are your shoulders tight? How are you? What are your emotions? Are you feeling excited? You can tune. The more self-aware you become, you can tune into how you're actually feeling, and you can enter that realm through the body. And so, are you excited? Are you sad?
Yeah, thank you. That's really, really
That's
helpful.
a simple answer to.
Yeah, it's a simple answer, but it's a deep answer. And none of this, a lot of us who are listening to you, Michael, we might have to watch the replay because it's first time, right? And it takes time. It's digestion, so it may not happen the first time. And I have a lovely comment here as well, because we talked about feedback a lot today, and it's so important because that can sometimes ruin healthy relationships, because it's not even what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah.
And Ristu here is saying that negative feedback puts you on the defense, and aggressive negative feedback is even more. And with timing and with some understanding and positive connotation, so it's like, what can I do to help you? Absolutely right. Ristu, thank you for sharing that. It's even like, don't even like go with that sort of intention. It's more about, okay, if this person is failing in my team, I take full responsibility.
I love what Risto's saying, and thank you, Risto. It's so true. I mean, you want, like I mentioned earlier in this conversation. I mean, when you're giving feedback, like to the boss, to anyone, you have to start off by even stating, "Look, I want you to be more successful.
Yeah,
and I think you're doing a great job.
Yeah,
and there's one or two things that I think you could improve. Can I sort of give you some of my observations?"
Yeah.
You're asking for permission. It's not like you're forcing it down their throat without their permission.
Yeah. And Michael, there are these quizzes online. If we can calculate our emotional quotient, is there a way to do that, to know where we stand, like IQ?
Well, the quiz thing, I don't know of any, to be honest. To be really honest, I always use the assessment tools that I work with, that I mentioned before from Genos. And by the way, you can go on the Genos website or others, and you can find the assessment tools there. So you can have a look at it. It doesn't cost you anything, I don't think. And
I think
it doesn't.
I think that makes sense, because IQ people are used to getting a score, right? And EQ, the thing is, we're so subjective. It's not a standardized test.
Although the assessments from Genos are incredibly detailed and statistically validated, so you do see where you stand on a line in great detail. So, for example, you can find out how you view yourself in terms of your EQ levels, and then you can find out how other people, what they expect of you, and whether you match up to that. And so, where there's a gap, so you do a gap analysis. You say, "Oh my God, I need to improve in that because I think I'm warm and friendly, and yet my team thinks that I'm a bit cold and unapproachable."
Right. I understand.
You see that on the assessments, but they are statistically clear as well as being, coming to life.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And there's a book as well mentioned, EQ 2.0, which has great rating tools as well.
I know that one. Yeah.
Yeah, we're coming close to the end now, Michael. I want to ask one more question. So, are there some sort of questions one can expect, because we may be having some job seekers here in the, as viewers right now, that we can, expect in interviews to certain EQ. And these are great questions also for someone who's hiring today. So not only a job candidate, but also a hiring manager.
Right. Well, I'm going to quote you. This is the first time in this conversation I'm actually going to quote from my notes. Again, talking about Genos, again, I think they're the best in the world. A lot of people do. And they're a great company. And thanks to my friends, Aoife and Derek, who are in charge of international for Genos. They're in Ireland. They actually sent me some of the questions that are contained in the assessment tool they have for hiring. They do.
Is that available, like publicly available, if people want to go there and check it out in more detail?
You know, I'm not sure. I know that you can actually take the assessment,
okay,
and learn about it, and you can be schooled in it.
Okay.
It's really great. I would like to just go through some of the questions to give you an idea.
Yeah.
So why is it, if you're talking to someone who you're interviewing, to measure their EQ levels, which, by the way, is crucial. How many hires get made on the basis of fantastic qualifications, track record, blah, 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 and yet they fail because they don't fit in with the culture? Because
And they don't.
Yeah, exactly. So this is really important. Just example, why is it important to effectively express how you feel at work?
Why is it important?
Important to effectively express how you feel at work. That's quite a deep question. Ask the question. And if they say, well, I don't know really. But what they should be saying is, well, if I can effectively express how I'm feeling at work, that means I can be happier, more approachable, because I'm being honest, I'm being authentic, I'm not holding on to things, I won't be passive aggressive because I'm, holding down my feelings of anger or distress or demotivation. I can effectively express my feelings at work. Why is it important? Because you will be a great team member, because people will love you, because you will not hurt anyone, because people will appreciate your authenticity and how genuine you are, and they can trust you. That should be the answer. Now, if the person you're interviewing is absolutely nowhere near that, you might, but that's just one question.
Yeah.
So I'll give you one more question. Tell us about a time at work when you felt particularly frustrated about something. What approach did you take to airing this frustration? Again, back to the same theme of, if you're an emotionally intelligent, skilled, you have the skills and competencies, you know how to deal. Remember the definition of emotional intelligence: to be able to perceive, understand, and manage your emotions.
Yeah, could you repeat that, Michael? So tell us about a time where you felt frustrated.
Where you felt particularly frustrated about something. What approach did you take to airing this frustration? Did you shout?
Yeah.
Did you shout at people, or did you just get very upset and go into a hole and And
the beauty is to leave it open and see what they got to say. So basically, you're saying examples of good behavioral questions are an indicator, a pretty good indicator of what they would be like as colleagues.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. And any other? Because the first one you asked was
more here. The third one.
Yes.
All right, here's another one. I'm supposed to skip these. What's your approach to facilitating difficult or challenging conversations?
I like how different these are. These are not the standard classical behavioral questions. What is your approach to facilitate?
To facilitating difficult or challenging conversations. What's your approach? Remember, you're interviewing someone you're with a view to hiring them. So what's your approach? How would you approach dealing with difficult, challenging conversations?
And something like, what would you suggest as an answer here? I'm not saying we have to be unauthentic and just say, right? But just a hint.
Well, I think the approach would be to prioritize listening very carefully with empathy what the other person's point of view is. And I'm just giving you sort of the context here, that you should be managing yourself going into that conversation that's difficult, going in with an open mind and being prepared to have your mind changed, being prepared to be honest, but to be really listening to that other person. The problem nowadays in the world, even in general, I think, is that there's less and less respectful listening. And what that does is alienates people.
Yeah.
And it makes it very easy to then label and attack and not engage. And so
react versus respond.
Exactly. And we all do it to some degree. Yes. I've been on the threads of the Times newspaper recently online, and there was one time I'm all for facilitation, and I often say to people, "You don't even know me, and you're calling me an idiot."
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. The stuff that trolls feed off of. I mean, I'm guessing I don't want to name call here, but trolls would be people who have issues with emotional intelligence.
Yes, I mean,
Mm.
there's no doubt about that. But at the same time, there was one time with one of the Times correspondents, quite a well-known one, and I just basically did what I shouldn't have done, which was vent how stupid I thought this individual was,
Yeah.
how wrong and how bullying and insensitive and
Yeah.
how narrow-minded. And I really regretted it. But, I caught myself. And that's the other thing. How do you do this stuff? You practice it. You
Yeah.
practice being conscious. And if you excuse my French, screw up, be
Yeah.
aware of it and
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Check yourself. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Absolutely true. We already discussed some online resources. If somebody wants to know what, watch the replay, because we've gone way over time. But Michael shared a lot of good stuff. Last question, Michael, and we're 11 minutes over. It doesn't matter. It's worth it. You look back on your career, Michael. You still have a way to go, right? But in the last many years, you already shared with us some vulnerable examples where you checked yourself and you're like, oops, what did I do? But if you could go back to the skinny Michael in the 20s, starting out his career, or even in the
How do you know I was skinny?
I'm, I'm making assumptions. We all were.
You're right, I was.
Most
Anyway,
of us.
right.
What would you tell that younger Michael today?
What would I tell him? Blimey, that's an amazing question. I would tell him to find a self-realization process or experience that you could have you earlier than you did. And I did it when I was 25.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do it in your teens, as I know some people have, somehow, then you're set for life, and you'll continue to grow and develop in these competencies and this skill of maintaining good relations, building good relations with people. I was lucky. It did happen to me quite early.
Yeah, you were lucky, but you worked hard as well. So I don't think there's any such thing as pure luck, but you got yourself as well. You worked hard, and like you said.
But let me say, Sonal, one other thing. I did start consciously on a spiritual journey when I was 13, like I mentioned at the very beginning. So I put myself in the way of this knowledge and these practices and these things that I could learn from, even if they were terrible. And I recommend to anyone listening to us today, who's on the call, do that in whatever way suits you. When I say spiritual, I mean in the broadest sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Absolutely. If you guys are still around, I'd love lots of applauses for Michael for giving his time to us today, which is really precious and super valuable. And I also want to thank you guys for being here today on your Friday. You've taken out an hour, 13 minutes of your day. So I want to say a big thank you. And thank you, Michael. I definitely have to watch the replay, because even though I'm sitting here with you right now and I was literally taking notes, but there's lots in it. And we, like you said, this is one of those topics that nobody becomes a master at, right? We're all works in progress. So with that said, huge thank you, Michael. And thanks everyone. Wish you a lovely weekend. Stay safe. Wear your mask. Be sensible. And we shall see you next Friday. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Sonal. Appreciate it.